Where can you find gourmet organic coffees, a friendly hometown atmosphere, and beautiful views of Humboldt Bay and beyond? It's Has Beans Cafe, open every day at 2nd and I Street in the heart of Old Town Eureka.
And there's that part that's right, right in front of the school building. Hi, Sherry.
We left this one for you.
Okay, thank you.
We felt that was appropriate. I'm not trying to tell you where it is.
I don't mind.
That was
Now that I can see the clock.
I figured west.
Hi, Daryl. How are you?
I go back, probably go back a long ways. We go back a long ways. He and Bonnie really came down to interview people at CAOs.
I gotta have something back. Yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, they did. Of course.
I'll have you help with this.
Okay, because I got yeah, so I have that.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, this one's, I've got all of it. Yeah.
All right.
See my name? All right.
John?
Hi, Carol.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Carol, how are you?
See ya.
You know Tom Westall? Yeah, we've met a few times. And this is, I can, yeah, for sure. Glad we can make it work out. Yes, yes. Yeah, Sherry, right? Yeah, these Jews got to see you.
How you been? Good.
And when it's done, we'll sit down and talk about this.
Okay, well, so actually after this meeting, I have to run.
We're water runners.
So I gotta run today, but
My one liner now is water, water everywhere, too many drops to drink.
Yeah, now,
You got it. Can't drink that many gallons.
Change in a couple of years.
Wes?
Hi, how are you? I'm good. Nice to see you.
hard to talk about the
Kennedy County,
limited resource. Huh?
Hi.
I was already good to see you.
Hi, I'm Sherry.
Sherry. Sherry.
Sorry.
Nice to see you. How you been? You been fine? You been good?
Well, you know,
Well, I know.
nothing wrong with me at $25 billion wouldn't care. But
Hi.
nice to see you.
Gas and tea. If you all would like coffee or tea, we have.
We have senior assignments here.
Yes.
Yeah, Japan had a tsunami and.
What's that?
I said Japan had a tsunami and you had a.
That's right. Well, I guess that puts things in perspective, you know?
Yeah, actually.
We don't have like, level
That's
towns
actually.
actually overheated nuclear power plants.
Yeah, that's very good.
Knock on wood.
Tim,
So is there?
we're just around the table. We decided to make this a little more casual than more behind the eyes.
We're gonna do that water and paper and we're getting pretty close. And they're, really receptive to us. Good. Enjoying some time at home, which I haven't had for a while. This week's a little bit quiet. Actually, this is my own working day. I took a hike and all that kind of yesterday.
Oh, nice. Good for you.
First run.
Catching my breath.
And here, I know where you are. Did we budget paper?
I just have one question. What do I do with my total
I would use it till it wears out and throw it away if I were you.
It's worth something. We have collectors on
Yeah, that's the other thing. Maybe an artifact. You might want to.
I might be a collector's item too.
Yeah, no.
Does anybody see Albert on beginning to come in or?
Gosh.
He's usually early. Yeah, he's normally early. Maybe we have Dee call Albert on, but.
We haven't had a chance to talk for a while, but there are some little bits and pieces in the ashes of the mess down there that we pulled out. Anybody else? You got it.
So I'm running late.
Okay.
When he gets here. Sorry to interrupt.
You know.
So, thanks so much for coming. It's good to have this opportunity.
This is Trinity County.
Yes, I'm here, okay?
That's our hospital assessment. Yeah, so.
Good job. Just right there, clapping on it. All right, well, Alderon is running a little bit late, so we're just going to start without him, and when he arrives, we'll make sure he gets introduced, and then we know him. So, Barbara, would you please do the roll call?
I will. Let's see. Director Wu,
Yeah.
Director Rupp,
Here.
Director Selma,
Here.
and myself, Director Heckerthorn. And then we have several guests here. We have our General Manager, Carol Reich, the Honorable Wes Chesbro, and that was Tom
Yes, Tom Wessel.
and John Maria. And then in the audience, we have Harold.
Fourth one,
Thank
Fannin County.
you. And we have a film editor here.
Charles Douglas, Humboldt
Joe,
Sentinel.
okay.
Sure. Okay, please rise for the flag salute. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So, I understand you all need to be out of here probably.
11 or so.
Okay, 11.
Yeah, but, well, earlier actually, but no later than that. It's
Yeah, so we'll try for 10:30.
10:30.
Thanks again for being here. And first up, we wanted to get some information from you about the state and the budget and, mostly the impacts for special districts, local government, all of that. So if anybody has any questions to lead off, or if you want to just launch right in.
Well, generally where we are, I guess it's been pretty well publicized, is the governor proposed a fairly balanced proposal of cuts on the one hand, and on the other hand, giving voters the opportunity to extend the special taxes, which we approved several years ago, beyond the sunset, which is coming up on July 1st. And we got the cuts. We haven't gotten the ballot measure yet. And June was the target date, and the opportunity to do that has come and gone. And so now the discussion is focusing around the possibility of the legislature by 2/3 vote doing a temporary or short-term extension in order to allow the voters to decide in November. That still requires a 2/3 vote. And there's lots of discussion about how we get those and what the prospects actually are. For whatever reason, and I'm trying not to be partisan here, but for whatever reason, the Republicans unanimously in the legislature decided that asking the voters is the same as raising taxes. So they're pledged to not, under any circumstance, raise taxes. So far, they have interpreted it as being that. Now, there's a small group of Republican legislators in both houses who have been talking to the governor, have put many things on the table as what the price would be to get them to just ask the voters. It's some of the things are directly budget related. Some of them have to do with long-term budgetary reforms. Many of them have nothing whatsoever to do with the budget. And sadly, they waited until 3 days before the governor's deadline for putting it on the June ballot to give them a list of things. And it started, I think, with a list of 5 things, and then within a week it had expanded to a list of 50-some items, which really raised the question about how serious they were about coming to agreement. But they continue to say that they're willing to negotiate with the governor, so we do have an ongoing conversation. The alternative is, there's different terminology that's been thrown around, like a doomsday budget or an all-cuts budget. The prospect of going, another 12 to 14 billion, depending on what the revenue winds up being at the end of the fiscal year. The prospect of that much money further being cut is devastating, in my opinion. It will take our already weak public school system and public safety system, law enforcement programs in the state, and just move them to the breaking point. And law enforcement across the board is unanimously lined up behind extending the very small vehicle license fee surcharge that we had approved 2 years ago in order to keep funding law enforcement and the education community across the board also seems to be unanimously in favor of extending the the sales and personal income taxes that were approved 2 years ago. So we'll see. It's not a easy or pretty time, and I think that insecurity that's been created for state employees, local employees, their families, school teachers, parents of school kids, it is really unfortunate, and something that we should be trying to create some greater long-term stability around. But I was required, I feel, because at some point you have to put your personal political interests aside and do your duty, to approve cuts that I never imagined I would ever vote for. Programs that I have worked very hard to build over many decades, taking really serious hits. But in this, I'm going to sound like a Republican now myself, but if you don't have the money, you can't spend it.
Well, that's true.
I mean, that's a basic reality, and I do think some of the reforms that the Republicans are asking it for, if we could, if they come to the governor in January. And there's still time, it's not out of the question, but they need to get really serious about negotiating. Some of them are things that really make a lot of sense. The devil's in the details, but for example, a reasonable spending limit that requires you to set aside money in a rainy day fund for the bad times, there's nothing conservative about that. It's just good fiscal policy. It should be something that Democrats and Republicans should be able to agree to. I mean, there's nothing progressive about running out of money in the recession and having to cut the crap out of programs. And so, I think trying to stabilize money so that we have, the budgets don't go up and down so drastically during and drop so drastically during the bad times is a reasonable thing for them to be asking about. Now, of course, there's real differences about what exactly would be in a spending limit, and how drastic a limit it should be. The broader definition of the problem is that we've gotten away, we collectively in state government and local government have gotten away over the years because California's economy is fairly resilient and recessions have usually been pretty short. We've gotten away with making some short-term adjustments, and the economy recovers quickly enough to backfill whatever kind of borrowing and moving money around that didn't provide real solutions. Well, that kind of thinking has always worked because of the fact that we've never had a recession since going back to the Great Depression that has lasted this long and been this deep. And so, instead of, if we'd known, I think some tougher decisions early on could have avoided the kind of mess we're in. But we put off the decisions, I think, both because of the stalemate between cuts and taxes, between the two ideologies, the two different points of view, and in the hope that, well, we've always recovered in 2 years, Well, it didn't happen, and so now really hard decisions are having to be made. And none of them are good, whether it's even asking the voters to raise taxes or make the cuts. None of them are good decisions, but they're decisions that have to be made because if you don't have money, you can't spend it, or you shouldn't be spending it. So that's a quick one. It doesn't zero in too specifically on special districts, and I'll maybe let you know. You can let me know what the particulars are about.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask her.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which was basically, given the difficulties that are going on at the state level, which are significant, is there a will at the state and in the leadership and the legislature to help preserve local government? Because I'm very concerned. I've seen what I think is the kind of dismembering of local government over the last 20 years, 30 years, I guess, for a number of reasons, and I'm worried that it's going to even get worse.
Well, there are some hopeful signs in the midst of all the bad things. One is if it works, and it can be worked out to the satisfaction of counties, and flexibly enough that counties as small as Trinity County and as large as Los Angeles County can find ways to live with it. The realignment proposal has the potential of really shifting control over programs back to the local level. The flaw in it, of course, is that the revenue sources are 5-year revenue sources, and the And the governor's, in order to reassure local governments, has proposed a constitutional amendment which would assure that the money would be available, but the taxes would go away in 5 years. And so, you know, that strengthens local government and presents another great threat in the future in the next recession to state government if we don't figure out how it's going to be funded. There's also a number of proposals in the legislature that would require bipartisan support, so it remains to be seen how they would work, but to transfer revenue-raising authority to local governments so that you could have local votes to raise taxes and more easily than can now be done, you know, to give a lot more authority to local jurisdictions. That has its flaws too, because you could wind up with a patchwork of levels of public education and government services really varying between counties depending on the politics of the county and whether the voters are willing to approve taxes at the local level. But it does, on the other hand, it is a tool to strengthen local control and local government, you know. So, and ever since Prop 13, cities and counties have become more and more dependent on state, and schools, of course, on state government, and I think realignment and the potential for transferring some taxing authority back to the local level could help to counterbalance the degree to which the state then, you know, says, well, we'll share money with local government during the good times, and we'll take local government's money during the bad times, you know, which is has been a real problem, I know, for local agencies.
Is your sense that that move is something that the legislature as a whole is looking to?
Well, it's unclear. I think there clearly would be a majority in support of it. It's unclear, you know, whether we could do it by majority vote or whether it's going to require a 2/3 vote. Senate President Darrell Steinberg has a bill to provide significant authority to local jurisdictions to on a county-by-county basis, and I think I haven't looked at the bill carefully yet, but I think a city-by-city basis too. You know, and I don't know about you know, meeting with you is raising these issues and refocusing on special district needs, but it would also be good to look at the question of districts' authority as well.
I know we have some black eyes in Southern California for local government, but I've always thought it was the best level of government.
Well, one of the thoughts behind providing the authority at the local level, or at least the voters' authority, is that people generally feel more supportive of paying for something that is transparent and close to home, and they can see what the money goes for. Yeah. You know. How are you? Wait. I mean, the hospital tax that was approved in Trinity County and is now up for renewal is a good example. Very conservative county, not a county where people love to pay taxes, but when they see exactly what the money's going to be spent for, and they know who's in charge, and they can go to a meeting locally and raise hell if they're unhappy with how it's being managed, then there's a sense of accountability that I think increases the enthusiasm for, and we've seen it with the assessments that go with local school bonds. You know, most places in the state, and that hasn't been 100%, but almost everywhere, a significant majority vote has been able to be achieved in order to get, again, people see what the money's going to be spent for. They say, okay, I know you're going to build a school building with it, and I know I can march to the school board and see how to spend the money. But that's a lot different than sending it up to the state and feeling like it just disappears into this big government bureaucracy.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
This has, I don't know if this has to do with us as special district, but there's 1,000 questions I'd like to ask you, which I'm not going to ask you because they're really not appropriate for this.
Well, talk to John, and next time I'm in town, you and I can have a cup of coffee or a beer.
Or whatever.
I'd be happy to sit down on a cup of coffee and spend a lot more time.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. I'm curious about the redistricting stuff that's going on now, and I know that's really close to home, and it would be to any legislator. I mean, how do you see that unfolding, or could you share with us
at this point, it's really unpredictable, because this commission has been created through this complicated process that the voters approved. They don't really have a track record to be able to say exactly what kinds of decisions they're going to make. There is a set of criteria in the bill which they're supposed to follow. I assume you're talking about the state district.
I am.
And they're not what a lot of people think they were. It doesn't say in there great competitive districts. What it says is that that they're supposed to be compact, that they're supposed to include, as much to the extent possible, communities of interest, that they're supposed to try to minimize the degree to which they divide up jurisdictions, so you don't have cities and counties. And that's not a 100% thing either, because obviously Los Angeles County is going to have a lot of assembly districts. But an example of that would be Sonoma County currently has 3 assembly districts, 2 Senate districts, and 2 congressional districts overlapping their boundaries. And that's kind of excessive in terms of dividing the county up. There's other examples around the state. So how they, the other thing is they have the Federal Voting Rights Act to consider, and there are counties, I think there's 4 counties in the state that are subject to court review of the redistricting plan. And so how they wind up drawing the lines is really hard to say. From my standpoint, I can guess at what would happen in our region, but and I can give you some scenarios, you know. It's going to be impacted significantly by how they decide to deal with the Bay Area, which sounds like that's a long ways away, but it creates ripples that go outward across the state. And there's the 4 districts in the state that are the most underpopulated and need to expand or be reconfigured are in the Bay Area, which potentially creates ripples outwards, you know. Now there's 2 different ways that have been suggested. There probably are more, who knows? Yeah. They could deal with that. They could literally just take one district out of the Bay Area and put it somewhere else where there's too many people in each district. And that would cause the districts to kind of implode towards the Bay. Or they could do what's traditionally been done, which is to kind of grow the districts outwards, and that creates ripples and potentially loses fringes of the Bay Area for Mike Thompson, for me, and for Noreen, Senator Noreen Evans, you know. And then where that pushes out is anybody's guess, you know. So, I mean, for us, there's only 2 things that really could happen. Either we would continue to have what we've had for 40 years or so, which is north-south lines, where for the most you have Assembly, Senate, and congressional districts from Nevada to the coast that run north and south from the Bay Area and Sacramento, or you could slice them east and west in some way. I think the reason why they've gone north and south historically is because it's much more clearly identifiable what the community of interest is. You know, on the coast you've got the coastline, you've got the watersheds of the Eel River and the Russian River, which are interlinked by water transfer. And you have fisheries issues, you have Highway 101, the railroad, and a number of issues that link us north and south, and far west commonality going east and west. Same thing's true of the I-5 corridor, same thing's true of the Northern Sierras, you know, that in terms of identifying economic and social and transportation corridors and all of those things. So we just don't know what's going to come out. I did note that I think they took the action. I saw the article in anticipation of it, but the Board of Supervisors was due to yesterday to ask for a hearing here, which sort of illustrates the problem with us being in the same district with Reading.
Yeah.
Who's going to drive 299 to get to a hearing?
I guess my interest is if you're going to change the polarization that's occurred.
Oh, the larger question. I was being very geographic.
I know. That was great. I was just kind of curious about whether.
I think, well, that together with the top 2 primary process will result in some moderation. I think it will lessen the influence of the far ends of the spectrum on their own parties, you know. because as what tends to happen now is that, you know, the primary electorate, with both parties' percentage of the electorate shrinking, who's left in each party is the far left and the far right, you know? And when you have a broader electorate, that will tend to cause elected officials to look at a broader range of points of view in positioning themselves on issues and concerns. And there are some parts of the state where clearly there will be districts that are more moderate. If I was going to guess statewide, and some of the pundits have speculated at this, I would say that the Democrats have a fair chance of getting to 2/3, but what that's going to also mean probably is some more conservative Democrats, which will tend to, you know, to make our tent a little bit bigger, you know.
Moderate.
But there's places in the Inland Empire, in Riverside and San Bernardino County areas, where there's been a lot of population growth. A lot of it's Latino. A lot of it tends to vote Democratic, but also is not necessarily doctrinaire Democratic. You know, not necessarily left wing. You know, and I think those areas there'll be more areas that tend to elect moderate Latino Democrats. Would be my guess. But that's just that's not a prediction. It's a guess.
No, that's, thank you.
Any other questions about?
I was wondering about, you know, back to special districts. I know at one time they were talking about taking the reserve funds, they're looking at reserve funds, and there are some special districts in Southern California that really have huge reserve funds. Is that something that's...
Well, I have to be totally honest and say in this fiscal environment, nothing is safe. So you know, some things are probably more easily argued for than others, but you know, I voted for. I mean, when you're cutting childcare and you're cutting in-home support services for the elderly, it sort of it winds up being a playing field where you're not. A really good argument, you know, for redevelopment last week becomes a much less strong argument when it's put up against some of the other alternatives, you know, and I think the same thing would be true of further taking of local revenues. And part of the problem that special districts suffer from, similar to redevelopment, is, you know, there's special districts and then there's special districts. There's redevelopment and then there's redevelopment. There are some excellent examples of really well-run special districts who are, you know, above reproach and who do a phenomenal job of what they do and are very transparent, and there's some really awful examples of excess and lack of transparency, you know, not just special districts, a few cities around.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We've heard of that, yeah.
And so, you know, the good guys suffer from being in the same boat with some that aren't quite as reputable, you know.
Would basically be on a case-to-case basis, each, you know.
I don't think, I mean, that's the problem.
It's not
It's very
overrated.
difficult for the state to, you know, what I've been able to do generally, that's what I was talking to Errol about, and it's mostly been for the very smallest counties, but I've been able to carve out some exceptions to things for the smallest jurisdictions, you know. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, Humboldt has been like just over the line. I mean, Del Norte, Trinity, and Lake County, sometimes Mendocino, we've been able to get into the small county exception, and Humboldt hasn't always made it. But same thing could apply to, you know, any, and I'd be very interested in working with you and also Special Districts Association, and if those kinds of things are under consideration, trying to figure out how to take those who are least deserving of losing the money, but also maybe who would have the biggest impact as a result. And sometimes, you know, it isn't just, like in the case of counties and cities, there's deferrals, which is just delaying payments, you know, just holding the money for a while in order to help the state's cash flow, and of course that's at the expense of local government's cash flow. If we wait, you know, a few weeks or a month to make a payment. We've been able to make the case that the smallest jurisdictions are the least able to stand that, and so and protect the smallest hospitals from the Medi-Cal rate cuts, you know, things like that. The first five money transfer the smallest counties, again, sadly not including Humboldt, but Trinity and Del Norte and Lake were able to get exempted, we were able to get exempted from that, so. But as far as the special district stuff, I haven't spent as much time focusing on it as I should, and I would welcome suggestions about how we could, to the extent those things are under consideration.
We will do that, yeah.
It's not always easy inside your organization to get them to, I mean, the counties have RCRC, which is separate from Seaside Regional Council of Rural Counties. And so they have sort of a little separate lobbying group that helps focus on the smallest jurisdictions, you know. And so it's not always politically easy if everybody feels that they're getting hit to get everybody to agree within your organization to support the carve-outs for some, you know. But to the extent either you individually or working with other more rural, smaller districts can identify what the impacts are going to be, and we can try to figure out how to minimize those. That's kind of, it's one thing, one of the few little bright spots I've been able to accomplish in this otherwise really bleak budget situation.
Well, we also, right, I mean, since we have municipal customers, and I think part of, for us, the concern also might just be for cities, because, you know, we have to work together to make sure that they can pay the water bills that we charge them. That's a concern of ours. So, you know, it seems like you're talking more about counties than the.
Well, we've done similar things for the small cities as well.
Special,
A couple other forums we could bring it to also, that there's Cal Rural Water, and so they tend to focus on the, you know, more rural, you know, analogous to the county example, not quite as much at the policy level, but we can work together on that.
Do they have
And
folks in Sacramento? Do they have
I
their representatives?
don't know, Wes, I don't know. The other thing that's been very impressive here, and I gotta give the county credit, is a few years ago, they created a kind of a network of the rural water and wastewater districts, and 2 nonprofits are supporting that. We and a couple other larger districts supported it. So it might be a forum we can have a few conversations, because I think there's been a lot of interest here, again, looking out for the small guy even. When you look at Lolita, look at Oric, look at Manila. So there are some real issues here that I think we want to be mindful of, and maybe we can put together, you know, some comments or a bit of a policy paper depending on the proposals that come
That
forward.
would be welcome. That would be welcome, and would give me the ability to at least try in the middle of this
Right.
process.
Oftentimes, we probably wouldn't count as smaller, even though it's all relative, but, you know, we always have had a policy of paying attention to the other
Think of a little
districts in the
bit.
county, yeah,
So if you did-
in the area in general. So any other questions on the state issues, or anything
I
else?
wish I could be the bearer of good news.
No,
Someday, hopefully before I'm turned down, I'll be able to come and say, we're built, we're
We're
rebuilt.
rolling the dough, what do you want?
You deserve that, actually. Well, okay, then we'll move on to our, to us, and our main, well, the 3 things that we wanted to share with you are our capital improvement planning process and where we are on that, our water resource planning, and the work that we've done around aquatic invasive species, and also, you know, how we can work better with the state to make sure that we can protect our little lake, but if everybody else is doing something else, then that, you know, means that our little lake is in trouble. So, we want to talk to you about all of those things, and Carol's gonna lead off on the CIP.
I'll be very brief. About 6, 7, 8 years ago, the board and management started just stepping back and saying, what are the issues on the horizon that are important for us to begin to pay attention to make sure we as a regional water supplier are going to continue to be successful. And the board did a lot of really, you know, good and hard work over that time period, and these 2 planning themes emerged. We're going to spend a little bit more time on water resource planning. And the CIP, and I know you're well aware of this, I mean, there's a lot of aging infrastructure, you know, in our county and the state and in the country, in various states of, you know, being looked at and addressed. But we decided we wanted to be as proactive as possible, given our community system is 50 years old. And this fiscal year, we will be finalizing a 20-year CIP. We kind of took a little bit of approach from a strategic and incorporating some policies of what should guide some of our investment decisions, and staff will be presenting that to the board in the next 2 months. But it's looking like, you know, numbers for us are going to be pretty staggering, the $50 to $70 million, if it's going to be maintained well and our community still have that reliable drinking source. And that's going to be a tougher thing to address given the loss of the mill. So there's clearly a nexus between these two, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So just wanted you to be aware of that. We also are being really thoughtful and frankly as aggressive as we can, looking for grants and programs that can support us. And there's one we'd like to maybe just quickly highlight to make sure you're aware of it, and I've already talked briefly to John and Zooey about this. That the highest priority projects in the short term are for us to put new laterals in our rainy collectors. That's the source of our drinking water. You'll see a picture of it in a few minutes. And then there's two key transmission projects that are very, very vulnerable, that if we lose them, the entire community's water supplies would be wiped out. One is there's a very bad piece of pipe on the southern peninsula. It just happens to be a bad material. And we were successful in applying and getting a FEMA hazard mitigation grant. So we're $2 million. It's going to fund 3/4 of that project. So we're working with FEMA, currently doing the environmental work. And given our success with that program, we applied for a new pipeline to serve Blue Lake and Fieldbrook over the Mad River. You sure did. You sure did. Thank you. And we literally just last month found out that that project is, I gave a copy of this to John, is eligible, cost-effective, and feasible. When we applied for the TechIte project, we didn't cross this threshold on the first attempt. We strengthened our grant application.
TechIte being the one on the peninsula.
Correct, yeah, sorry. So we crossed the threshold, our first attempt here, and there's two different sources of money. They're both federal grant programs. One's an annual appropriation through the Hazard Mitigation Program, but there's also what they call PDM, pre-disaster mitigation, and that's the money that comes to the state every time there's a federal declaration. They have to set aside a certain amount. And so there's a separate pot of money.
We're actually trying to prevent future problems.
And flood's the best example. Why do we keep, after the fact, after the flood, investigating and saving the firehouse? Let's move the firehouse or the school. That's the thinking. So this is a federal program, but we wanted to make sure CalEMA administers it. So don't know if there's any influence on the state as to high priority projects for communities. And that's really what we wanted to raise awareness, and everyone supported it. Obviously, Blue Lake and Fieldbrook County OES, your office, Senator Noreen's office, and Congressman Thompson's office, and the manager of Blue Lake and I and Fieldbrook have just met with Liz McGee and John Driscoll, and they've committed support at the federal level.
I'll do everything I can to be supported.
And there could potentially be a nexus if the Annie and Mary Trail at the end of the day looks viable, where you could have a new pedestrian bridge that also supports our pipeline. At the end of the day, there's trail money and water money and community assets. So synergistic.
So are the problems just with the pipeline or also the bridge?
The pipeline's fine, it's the bridge.
It's the bridge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't have any control of the bridge, so we are
very vulnerable.
Very
vulnerable.
And so
One of the footings, the rockers are fully extended, the side, very vulnerable to the size of the vent, and that's the only source of water for those two communities.
I have a great interest in having that trail there, so as an active bicyclist, I love to ride.
And that's why there's potential synergies there.
We did, when we were looking at the different options for other, how to do it, we asked our engineer to also look at it from the angle of, could people walk across it, or could you?
Do we know if the bridge is salvageable, or does it have to be, would it have to build a new structure?
Doesn't seem like it is.
We didn't look at it from a, if it had to return to its prior function, but based on the footings, the rockers extended from the deck, not something we felt we could even touch.
I think what we looked at was, we didn't look at the structurals, we looked at the integrity of the bridge, cursory, and saw that it was not going to. Then basically in terms of engineering costs, we did engineering work on our own pipeline suspension across the river with a commitment to work with the Annie and Mary Trail folks. If in fact they had funding, we would bring it back in and work with them. But we needed to, for in terms of expenditure our dollars, well, we wanted to spend the dollars on water.
How in terms of the timing of the Annie and Mary Trail, where are they in their planning process? Do you know, John, or maybe you folks know?
It's still the cloud of rail banking and abandonment is still over the issue, because the process had started some time ago, but never was completed. So then the question can be raised by some who are concerned about the trail in their backyard, that it really was abandoned and not abandoned.
Oh, I see.
So all that stuff has still got to go through that process.
Well, and there's a window, but probably a diminishing window, shrinking window, you know, bond money from Coastal Conservancy and others by which, you know, building a bridge is conceivably a fundable thing, but it's going to be a while before we have any more environmental measures on the ballot. And so that money, as it dwindles, it's going to.
We could morph our project into, I mean, I know that all of us have worked on this, because I know that maybe you could speak better to it than I can, but I know that we could morph our project into creating a trail access. In other words, we could incorporate some crossing. But that's really crossing with our
good to
plan.
Pursue talking with the trail folks. And you know, it's conceivable, I don't know where the property ownership or right-of-way issues are, but it's conceivable that you could justify a bridge even if the whole trail wasn't built, you know, that it would give pedestrian bicycle access, you know, a portion of the trail being built, even if the whole thing wasn't ready to roll, in order to get it in the line in time to make these two things happen together, you know. So it's definitely something that, and it's great that the water district's pausing to look at that and say, you know, see if we can pull it off, but there could very much be a displaced, what's the right term here, a mistimed.
Well, they know about our situation and they know about our commitment to, you know, be cooperative. I mean, we can't spend our ratepayer dollars on that.
Oh, sure, of course.
Make sure that.
But on the other hand, they could complement each other.
Exactly, exactly. You know,
Work
that's exactly,
together
like
on
there's no reason
Yeah.
why that wouldn't be a good idea.
I think the first phase of the trail that they've been actively pursuing would go from Arcata to our park at Station 3, Station 1, and that next linkage to you get to the bridge and go over the bridge. I don't know where that is in the development or the design, but the only design I've seen is for the first one. And I guess the problem with is the authority hasn't done the title searching of local parcels to figure out whether they purchased their right of way or they retained their right of way.
And some of our friends are in that first section of the most objection.
Yeah, because they're the closest to the trail.
So then you add on the layering of the abandonment banking, you can't do one without the other. There's that gap in time that someone could say, well, you abandoned it, you can't have it back for anything but a rail. And
there's a lot bit better argument of saying that on the Annie portion than there is the rest of the railroad, because the tracks are still there, but they're gone.
Well, what we ought to talk to the trail folks about is whether or not, and I don't know the answer to this question, I'm just posing the question, whether or not the bridge itself, if it could be accomplished, would become a priority if there was a synergy here and there was Coastal Conservancy money available or some other transportation money or some other source to.
I know that the Mad River Summerfest is at our park. This is going to be the third time, but all the funds from that goes to the Annie Mary Trail group, we were told.
And it's being coordinated by Jen at RCAA, right?
in part, there's John Murray is actively involved with it.
Doesn't he live right next to right next to the tracks himself?
Yes.
Close by.
Yeah.
I think it causes design alternatives to be really looked at, which means how it affects every other part, including the bridge, is also got to be a balancing act. So how they can work with the neighbors, they have to get out there and sell it to their neighbors, and we can go from there.
But the existing bridge is, it's all lead-based paint. And I remember when they did Hammond Bridge, that was a major expense and effort. It's just that bridge is going to become a liability at some point. We have a seismic event. Who would clean it up?
Yeah.
So, nobody's making.
So yeah, that definitely is something that we have, passed a resolution in support of the trail. So, but I hope that it doesn't completely overshadow that, we're also, part of it, our real concern is public and the water.
And you'd have to, Fisher Cut Bay, you'd have to, funding money became available to solve the one problem and the other isn't ready to be solved. And
Right, yeah, we do. And our
you
staff
cannot proceed because of the trail issue.
And Carol and our staff have done a really good job of, I mean, we are 50 years old, and there are a lot of projects like this, and it's really good that we are about to, be able to look at them kind of all at once and figure out how to finance them.
Are these two, I presume, are the weakest points in the distribution system?
Yeah,
exactly. Highest part of the distribution.
Yeah, so it's good to be able to get some other money to help us pay for them, because they're gonna have to happen, whether they're, we get grant money or not, so. Working the state is helpful too, whenever that can happen.
Are the federal dollar, are all the dollars that coming into it, are you going to have to buy additional right-of-way?
We are going to have to look at right-of-ways on both sides. Most likely, we haven't invested a lot of time yet, John, but we're probably going to be able to land that fairly easily. But there's a little bit of right-of-way work, especially on the north side of the river.
Okay.
Where exactly is the location that we're proposing?
It would be a little bit west of the current bridge.
Downstream?
Yes, downstream, yes.
He was asking that the other day, I couldn't remember if it was downstream or upstream.
And we just received notice that this is going to move forward, and it probably will go, not that fast.
It might take 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
We were in the hopper for funding this year. I'd be very surprised if we got the letter saying the funds there. Last, with the tech guide, after it was deemed eligible, took 3 grant applications. But let's just say the next 2 to 3 years.
And we're not building anything yet.
And then it's,
We're still
then it's
working on
3
the
years.
environmental stuff on Tech Eye.
Yeah, once we have an agreement, after the environmental work's done, we would have 3 years to do it. So we have a little bit of time.
We're
and
not
that's
working
where.
on it.
Sounds like it could be your last ribbon cutting.
We'd like that. You know what? If we get the project, I'm going to remember that. You're going to cut the ribbon for a trail and a water pipeline.
You can,
Good to me.
Give them incentive.
All right.
That's what he can't wait for that.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Thank you.
Okay, well then, so we do have a bit of a presentation, and Carol did a little bit of, since to try and find out if you were opposed to PowerPoints, and we didn't get the sense that you were. So,
We're not keen on them.
and we are going to
start to nod off, we'll take that.
Yeah, it's going to go pretty quick. And we are going to do a bit of background just because, well, one, we've been doing this in our community a lot in the last year and a half. We've been doing a lot of public education to prepare our community for moving forward and getting a lot of good public input. And so we put together this presentation, and we thought that it might be helpful to you, even though you're, probably are in Alderon's vision, right? And so you might know a little bit more than, for example, when we do this for Noreen, but
We took a lot of the basic background out for you.
Yes.
You know it.
So, but as you know, the Water District has been here for 50
I've been
years.
drinking the mat for a long time.
Probably not all of those 50 years, but.
Close.
And-
Almost 4/5 of those 50 years.
And we've worked to provide a really efficient and cost-effective system. And one of the real highlights here is that it is an environmentally friendly system. We don't have any out-of-basin water transfers, and we have very little impact on the natural hydrograph, and we actually enhance flow through fisheries. And that is one of the things that we have discovered over and over again is really important to make sure that people know, because when we think of rivers and dams on the North Coast, we all think of gotta get those dams down, and we do in the places where they're really harming rivers, and that's my own little editorial. So, and we do have a really strong and effective partnership with our wholesale customers and other stakeholders in the community. And I guess I actually have the clicker. Yeah. But we do have, we're 50 years old, so our infrastructure is aging, and then we also have seen a significant loss of our customer base with our industrial side and the mill closures. So we have to address both of those things, and actually both of them were started before the mills closed. We're working on our CIP process and our water resource planning. So the CIP is nearly done, and this is just an example of a project just to kind of give you a sense of some of the costs that we're looking at. One of the highest priorities that we didn't mention is replacement of our rainy laterals, which are really the heart of the municipal drinking water system, the rainy collector.
And those are the pipes that take the water out from the
Right,
main
yeah,
roads?
they're underneath, down in the riverbed.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah. And so we're, not getting as much efficiency out of those as we would like, and then also we know that as time goes on, you know, they're gonna be less and less reliable.
So the wells themselves are in serviceable shape? I
Yeah,
mean,
the concrete.
they continue to be fine, but it's the connecting pipes that take the water.
Correct.
They've been buried in
Right.
the ground for 50 years, they're deteriorating, and they begin to corrode. And so we've gone in, what we, first
Yeah,
step was,
Go ahead.
what's the first step was to go in and look at it. Which is, I mean, we've done all the preliminary work. And also we ran a cleaning, in an effort to clean them to see if that would increase the amount of water. And also it's expensive because you have to pump harder, you know, less volume.
So more power?
So it requires more energy, so it's a big, and so we have two goals here, to increase the flow of water and reduce the cost of pumping water. Are the two things we're
And
talking
we
about.
actually started at Station 3.
Yes.
We're actively doing the project.
Yeah, we're moving.
I mean, we've done a lot of stuff, groundwater, we looked at groundwater to see where the groundwater was, to make sure that was working, and we weren't, and how we were impacting that, so we know that, we, you know, characterize that. And we look at the rain wells themselves, and what it would take to fix them, and now we're at the stage where we're actually in a position where we can begin to refurbish the rain wells one at a time. We think we're gonna see some good results from that.
We also changed the motors, you know, much more efficient with getting more water out.
We do that on a regular basis, is, you know, go to low energy, high performance pumps, try and cut down on costs.
Do you have a question, Donna?
On replacing, are you taking it out or like putting a sleeve over inside of it?
We would just abandon
Yes,
those and then
Oh,
get
New ones in the short term, and they had valves on each lateral that are totally gone, so part of the project is to put new valves on so you can isolate. So we would project new laterals, leave the existing ones in, and at the end of the day, when they fail, you can turn off the valves.
There won't be any surface ground disturbance.
And I meant to say at the beginning, but you all have covered it, that everyone should feel free to jump in and add.
Well,
How we did.
They all have done this before too, so.
They're good at that.
how have relations with the Fish and Wildlife Service and fishing game relative to disturbing the stream?
Well, on this project, it's so far down that, you know, there isn't really any nexus there.
But if you're replacing the lateral, you have to go into
There are
Stream
No,
damage.
you're in
No,
the caisson,
you're
you're
in the
in,
structure.
go into the structure and
Then we
then
drill on
push
it.
out.
Oh, okay, so there isn't any,
No, so we
Correct.
don't have to.
well, that's good. 'Cause
Yeah.
we've had some other cases where, you know, I think of the rebuilding of the trestle in Fort Bragg for the footbridge. Took years of wrangling with, just so you could go in there and even test do testing in the water. You know.
Well, there are reasons why we need to go into the river, and we are in the middle of getting the permit renewed for that. And we have, you know, we have a habitat conservation plan, so as a district on the whole, we have a pretty good understanding of all of the ways that we impact the river and a good relationship. But we are in the
But
middle
there's
of
sort of
trying to
ongoing
negotiate some
grandfathered
things
activities that
came
you
out of
have.
nowhere.
Well, they should be, but we are encountering some difficulty, and we are working at that at the staff level at the current time.
Which
And,
agency?
Fish and game,
They just
they're
recently
fishing
said
and gaming us.
Yeah.
And we
They
don't
have some new
get, we
staff.
don't get it.
and-
So we're working through that, and I don't, you know, just so you know.
We talked about it at
we're
our
still
last
working
meeting, and
with
there
staff.
wasn't a plan to come
Yeah.
talk to you yet.
Yeah, we're not gonna talk to you about it unless, you
Yes,
know,
we need
I
to.
mean,
But it may be.
we're trying to work it out at the appropriate level.
they're
Well,
expanding.
but
They're
it's,
reinterpreting the statute, and they're requesting information that we think we've already provided them. But it would cost a lot of money to do the studies that they're asking for, but we're still trying to negotiate with them, so we haven't
all
got
the
a brick wall yet.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's
He
pre-made
was there in the
copies of
beginning, so he
Yeah.
knows the stuff.
Do you have a consistency determination with the
Mhm.
state?
Sure.
we do.
Just look over.
Well, I have newfound capacity in my staff for dealing with fisheries issues
Yes.
since I got appointed as chair of the Joint Fisheries Committee and hired Tom to be the consultant. So, and he's got, you know, long-standing relationships with folks throughout the agencies, and so I would encourage you not to overreact if you can work it out, but to the extent that we need to dig into it and try to be helpful to figure out solutions, I'm hopeful that we can they need assistance.
Thanks,
For the-
appreciate that, thank you.
The effort the district put into preparing the first HCP for a water agency state, we went through section 10 and section 7. It's been real helpful. We worked out, yeah. And all the fishery agencies and the Army Corps have all been very receptive because we did that up front. It's just this year something's new. So.
Well, among other things, it may not be directly the cause of the potential conflict, but they're also, woefully understaffed. Yes. So I mean, that's been. I know a lot of people who have regulatory and relationships with Fish and Game who are real frustrated just because getting somebody to come in timely to talk or look at something can be really challenging.
Well, we're hoping that we can just bring these new folks up to speed and iron it out. But this district has always had a history, even before you had as much diversity on the board and as many folks who might identify as environmentalists on the board as being very proactive about working with agents.
They're out of the old white guys.
Yeah. You can turn around and see.
I resemble everybody.
But anyway, the purpose of this.
How did that happen? I was the young troublemaker.
I know, that's right. I used to be
But anyway, the purpose of this slide was just to show that that's just one project on our CIP, and we're looking at 1.5 to 3 million per collector, and ultimately we'll be looking at replacing all of them. So here's some just pictures to show you, the complexity of the project. You have to dive down. That's in the caisson there itself, and that's. Bruce mentioned that we, had worked on cleaning it and taking video.
You can get me
So
down
you can
there.
see all that there.
It's a really dangerous work environment.
And then, so therefore, we have to hire specialists and all of that. So these are the two projects that that Carol mentioned that we also need to and are in the process of working to get funding for. So the loss of our industrial customer base, you can see here. The blue line is is the industrial customers. The red line is our municipal customers, and then the black is the two put together. So in the mid-90s, there was when the Simpson Mill closed, and you can see where we are now after the Evergreen Mill closed and no one else opened up.
Just a
at zero.
Brief sort of editorial comment. It's always been an absolute mystery to me how you could have an industrial site on the California coast with deep water shipping and an abundant water supply and not have developers lined up with industries to site there. I just, it's mind-blowing to me. I tried, when Simpson left, and I was in Sacramento as a member of the Integrated Waste Management Board in the mid-90s, I tried to get McMillan Modell, which is a British Columbia paper producer who takes a lot of the newsprint from California and makes recycled newsprint to consider. They were looking at West Sacramento, and I tried to lure them up here after Simpson closed, thinking, because part of the problem is water supply. I said, we got it. But it just seems like with all the problems that the California economy and the world is facing, and the difficulty of siting industrial facilities, that's just like a prime location for something, that's water intensive. And I just can't really understand why. In the current environment, of course, there's not capital to invest in anything, and so except for maybe high tech, So that's part of it, but still.
That's
Well,
what
we're
Bob
so
Simpson
isolated,
told us.
and yeah.
He wasn't able to get the capital.
It was heartbreaking, really. I mean,
Yes.
that would have done something for the community. It was already here. So.
Well, that's the other thing more recently I did was, as did many of you, actively support his effort to get that, try to keep the mill.
And I do have some slides at the end if you're interested in terms of looking at other large water users, and it's kind of astounding to see how the amount that the mills use is really just second to none in terms of water use. The other industry just doesn't even compare. But
We can't grow our microbreweries big enough.
It's
a lot of beer.
Yeah.
A lot of beer. If we put all the breweries there, the amount of water that all the breweries in the United States use, it wouldn't even come close to the real.
Yeah.
It would use about 3 months worth of Neil's water.
We took all the intensive businesses, water use businesses, you know, slaughterhouses and sheetrock or gypsum, plus bottling plants, all that, put them all out there, 10 million gallons a day, we got 60.
Yeah, well, I'll show you, because we did that research because we thought, you know, there must be some other options, but,
Well, you know, you hear that, I'm sure you've thought of all these things, but you hear about the manufacturing process for silicon chips being very water intensive, and certainly breweries, you know, and the thing about paper and pulp, which is traditional, you know, that, I mean, it's good news and bad news, I suppose, for the global environment, but paper use in the paper market is just continually declining, you know, and yeah, on top of that, a big recession, you know, the global recession.
Well, it's hard to believe that paper use is declining when you see all the.
It is, isn't it? It truly is, but.
But, and even the pulp mills, they had reduced their usage of water. I mean, it was, you know, they were about 60 million, and they're both going in down to, what, 15 million?
Yeah.
Well, one thing is real different between my place in Sacramento and my place here. There, I very carefully conserve water in here. I don't worry about it. You know, although I may have to with the cost if the cost of water keeps going up. But from the standpoint of worrying about the water supply, it's not the same issue.
But the irony of that is that, you know, with the governor's plan for 20% conservation by 2020, the water rates go up. I mean, the people in Marin are just, they almost recalled the entire water board because of the rate increase, and it was all from water conservation. And so it's a hard sell. You know, it's like, we want you to cut your water use by 20%. Yeah, and to reward you, we're going to raise your water rates. Yeah,
well, we don't focus, and it's, politics is very, getting back to like the problem with redevelopment, you know, politics and governmental process has a really hard time focusing policies where they're needed and not where they're not, you know. And so, you know, in the case of redevelopment, you know, they've got a redevelopment agency in Beverly Hills, and they're doing a 4-star golf course in Palm Desert, you know, and you're going, that's the use of redevelopment, you know.
Yeah.
And same thing with water conservation policies, you know, I mean, the difference between, you know, we have a very hard time going, you know, basin by basin and looking at what's the appropriate policy for that basin, you know. And instead, it's like one size fits all. We got to do this cookie cutter approach that just says we're the same as Los Angeles, you know.
right. So, in addition to the cost increase implications for our municipal customers and therefore our ratepayers, we also are concerned about our water rights, which the water district holds for the benefit of the community. And you know, you obviously would know this, but the state owns surface water resources and gives entities like the water district permits, as long as we have a specific public purpose.
The one question I had about that is, if you allocate water for in-stream use, does that mean that you continue to retain the right to it?
Yes, that is a beneficial use, but therefore, yeah. So then you would presume though that you wouldn't, you know, be able to move it around as easily. But yeah, you still maintain that right.
Use it as a consumptive use, a dedicated instrument.
It's not a cut and dry issue either, because, I mean, you know, fisheries expert, well, we have 2 fisheries people here, but, you know, the estuary of the Mad River is now getting more fresh water than it has in the past. Whether that's an environmental plus or negative, we don't know, because it depends on the fisheries, and it may either benefit some fish and harm others, or vice versa. We have not done.
I mean, I just heard on NPR this morning,
Just running water down
about
there.
after the Gulf spill, they diverted a whole bunch of fresh water to try to push the oil out, and it wound up creating all kinds of fisheries problems because of the mix of fresh and salt water.
Mussels that we're talking
So
about.
one of the keys here is, you know, we're not there. Running water down the river is maybe a good idea, but we're not sure yet. And until we can show that in fact it benefits, then it's not a beneficial use.
Right,
It doesn't
right.
benefit. So it doesn't help us in that regard. So we have to be
Unless we
careful
can
about
prove it.
that.
Yeah,
We're
well,
looking-
just to,
but I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure the estuary is seeing more water because we're not pulling the industrial water out.
That's what's changed. We kept releasing the same amount of water that we used to deliver to the mills, because there's 75 miles of river that's been getting that water for the last 55 years, and we didn't want to reduce that. We didn't want to impact 75 miles of river,
So it's just
because we're
the
not
issue
pumping it
it's
at
up in the
Essex.
air. It's not the
Keeps
main
on
stem.
going.
The main stem is as it was and studied.
So the water is going out whether you claim it as a beneficial use or not.
Well,
I
as
mean,
long
if
as
you
we
don't have a
release
customer
it,
for the water and you leave it in the river, it's going to
Well, we're releasing it from Matthews in the summer and the fall, and it's going down the 75 miles to Essex, but now we're not taking it out and sending it to the mill, so that 20 CFS is now going down to the estuary for the last 2 summers.
It's a little complicated, because actually, we would not be allowed to do that, but for also holding hydro water rights permits.
Right.
Us releasing it for consumptive use would actually be illegal by the way the state water rights work, but we happen to hold hydro rights, so we had a little wiggle room to exercise use of a hydro rights. Hydropower, yeah.
So
And
great.
it's the same water, but
it's
it's
a
not
separate
consumptively used, so we would still lose the consumptive use when our permits come up if we don't find new actual use. So it's kind of, it gets complicated.
Permitting process.
so we've been running our
Yeah.
demo pit more than we would
Yeah.
have before, because we can afford to do that, and that gives us a little bit more control.
And
But
flexibility.
if
This
we didn't
all
have that
represents-
link, we wouldn't actually be able to.
We literally could, we'd have to keep that water in roof, we didn't have that hydro right. We could not release it.
So right now, our permits are for municipal and industrial water use, although they could be changed to expand or change in general. But if an entity doesn't fully use water, then the state can revoke and would revoke the permit and the right. So you can see here our water rights permits originally, yes.
When you say lose it, would it be losing down to the level that you already have a claim for?
No, we'd be losing it to the level that we're actually
Using.
using.
We're using.
This is what we're looking at now.
We have a claim for right now, okay, so to explain this, originally where Carol's pointing it, we had rights to more than we do now. And that was with a project, the idea was that at some point they'd raise the dam even further and we would, need more water with expansion.
Well, that's where, on that graph, we used to have rights up
Oh,
here,
you've
phase
changed
2.
it,
Yeah,
okay,
so
great.
phase 2 is gone, we used to be up here, we dropped phase 2 in
Down to
exchange for
there.
a 25-year extension. We were the only water district in the whole state that got a 25-year extension to give us time. So this is our current as-built.
When was that 25-year extension, right?
2004, so we have till 2029.
2029 under our current permits. So you can see our actual water use going down.
So
and
2 pulp
then
mills, right.
2009 is the same as it is in 2011. So all of that white arrow on the right represents what we would lose by 2029. The other thing, I guess, worth mentioning too is that we have until 2029 under our current permits, but under state law as well, 5 years of non-use can constitute abandonment if somebody challenges. You're right, probably we wouldn't expect that challenge or question to come directly from the state right now, although with water, things could change, but probably it would mean somebody else would challenge our right and be
The
interested
old
in using it.
specter of the water bagging.
Well, that or
Actually,
somebody
or
coming up
somebody
and
like
claiming
that,
it and using it,
Yeah,
They
so-
don't have
and
any
they figured out-
infrastructure.
Yeah, that's why the water bag comes to mind, is because that's the potentially feasible way of moving the water as opposed to, building pipelines through mountains.
Right.
Yeah.
It gets a little more complicated in that the water's not in the river, the water's in Matthews, in Ruth Reservoir. We hold it for release in the summer and the fall. So it's not like there's 70 million gallons of water flowing out that we're not using it. It's being stored in Ruth, so in order for it to be used, we control Ruth. And
Well, but if somebody came along, this is very hypothetical, I hope, at this point, but if somebody came along, would say, and said, we want, bag fresh water all the way, and we're going to challenge the district's right to that water, would you?
we could sell it to them before they could jump.
That hopefully.
They get the right element, and
And
then
they
they actually get
Our
legal
best
rights to that
defense-
water.
Our best defense, we've been told, is to develop a plan for beneficial use of the water, because the permit basically assumes a maturing of the use. In other words, you get the permit with the idea that over the life of the permit, you're going to mature that use to the benefit, and there are 13 or so benefits, including in the river flows. And you're going to do that over the 25 years, and then when you go back to Water Resources Board, you're going to say, okay, we want to renew our permit, we've matured it to the, to the 60 million gallons, and we'd like to renew it for another 20 years. Or you go back and you and you're only using 20 million gallons, and they're gonna say to you, you know, you're gonna lose 40 million gallons, and you're back to 20. And then that's available to anybody else in the state who can come up and show the beneficial use for it.
Well, and as much as we're having a really wet year, and population growth in California has stabilized because of the recession and other things, I think it's really, really important to continue to realize how at risk North Coast rivers are and our water supply is over the long term. I mean, imagine either human caused or non-human caused, I subscribe to the human caused, climate change and continued desertification of Southern California, or you know, ultimately the building of the big conveyance around the delta, and then in combination with those things, then the supply, the existing basins of the western California become very, very vulnerable. And so, even though it seems outlandish to imagine what it would take to get the water those distances, I think it's really important to realize the necessities that Mother had mentioned. And if there's millions of people without water in Southern California,
They're gonna come out of water.
We ship oil around all over the place, and water is
We're not
important.
plumbed in, so it's gonna not be easy.
no, it's not going to. No, I don't think it's a short-term immediate threat. I'm talking about it in the long run.
We're thinking down the road.
I'm talking about it in the long run.
If you lost the right to use that water, what happens to it? Does it stay in the lake? Is it not allowed to be captured behind the lake?
There could be some question of whether we are allowed to capture it and retain it in the lake, but that aside, it would sit in the lake and we wouldn't be releasing it because we wouldn't have a use for it.
Well, for the hydro, we would need to release it.
Right, we do
Release
have
for
the
hydro.
hydro permits, and so it's complicated, and I think your question earlier, Wes, of if somebody else were to come and want it, it's not exactly clear, you know, how that would be worked out, how much we could be forced to release for somebody else, or, you know, what that might look like. And if that came up, you know, we would obviously want to learn more about that. Our perspective now, though, has been, you know, as much as possible, we want to be in control of as much of that as possible, because that puts us in the best position for our community to, you know, dictate how it's used and make sure that it's benefiting the community. So that's kind of the way we're looking at it now. But it's an interesting situation that I don't know, I don't think that part of it exists anywhere else, and there's a lot of other elements that don't really exist anywhere else either.
And recreation is a beneficial use, but that would lock the water up and be available for consumptive use.
Is the hydropower considered a consumptive use?
No.
No, it's a,
Absolutely.
that's why the right is separate, even though it's the same water.
The amount of water.
But it doesn't secure, using it for that purpose doesn't secure.
Correct. No.
We're only actually talking about 3% of the flows on average of the river, right? So we're not really talking about, we're not talking about 97%. It's just that percentage rises in the summertime and is way down in the winter, obviously. So we get huge flows that we don't, that are natural and have been in the wintertime out of the Mad River. And then we augment those flows in the summertime in July and August, when typically the river dried up, basically, that reach between the, you know, the lower part of that 75 miles actually dried up.
And also, in the summertime, the Mad River is fully appropriated too. So, so there isn't, you know, right now, anybody else that can make us figure out the answer to that question.
You know, we can hang on to this,
that's
and
counting our
the
rights,
river's
yeah.
fully appropriated, and as far as,
Is there a declaration of fully appropriated water?
State board did that probably about 15 years ago in Mad River. Yeah. Now the state water resource control board has the right to revisit it, but they went through a proceeding and findings and the declaration, and that's the outcome for the MAD.
Does that mean that somebody's ability to come and claim the water is only seasonal, would only be some during the winter time?
Well, during the summer, there is no access, so you can't, so they could.
So it would only
The
be,
only water available in summers and mountains.
But if they wanted in the summer, and someone's savvy, 5 years of non-use or
They
house
could say-
abandonment, so they would file a claim.
Say,
they're going to claim that pipeline.
Right, yeah, in the winter, there could be more available. In the summer, It's fully appropriated, but that would be their strategy if they wanted to do something before it naturally expires.
So the fully appropriated declaration is a seasonal?
Yeah,
Yes.
And what's the season for that?
this summer and fall.
I'd have to look, Tom, I've
Okay.
got it, I think it's May through October, but I'm flying a memory.
Okay, good enough.
So to switch gears away from the rights for a second, and we'll come back to that repeatedly, but the other significant impact of our situation is the cost shift to our municipal customers. The last year that the Simpson mill paid, you can see our customers were paying $708,000. After the loss of both mills, we were looking at having to bill them $4 million. And the increase isn't just about the loss of the mills. We've also seen regulatory costs go up and operating costs, especially power, go up as well. And then we had to build a new drinking water treatment plant.
And he came to the dedication. He came to the dedication.
And because of our aging infrastructure, those costs are going to continue to go up as we look at replacement projects.
Are you exploring further engagement in power production, either hydro or other sources that could help, power the pumps and things like that? You mentioned efficiency and replacing with
We're
more.
limited with the, I guess, PG&E's distribution.
Yeah.
We have the option of having a second hydro facility at the dam, and just because of the bottleneck of distribution, we let that option go.
Well, the other problem was it wasn't cost effective,
Yeah.
the development cost relative to the return. I mean, there used to be the avoided cost, you remember the days when we did the avoided cost stuff? And then that's gone by the board, so in effect it's not cost effective. It'll be a drain on the ratepayers, not an addition.
We probably would build the hydro plant we have now.
No.
Right, even the hydro plant we have now,
built when
with
it
it
was-
all having been paid for, it's debatable whether it actually pays for itself. Because of the hydro plant, we are regulated by the federal government instead of just the state. And the regulatory costs that I said went up, a lot of that is from FERC. And if we didn't have the hydro plant, none of those regulations would.
$13,240
Yeah.
in regulatory.
Obviously, we'd
Not
still be
to turn
regulated
into
by the
a
state,
Republican.
but.
Yeah. It was enough for me anyway, I gotta tell you.
Well, I'm green, and I'll complain about that too.
Well, we
So,
all. Just a little partisan joke. At Bruce's expense.
so our ratepayers have seen a dramatic increase, and there's a slide that we have that actually isn't
It's just
good, but
some
if you want to
numbers.
just peek at it in terms of what
Square.
the end user, the implications of this in Eureka or in Arcata have been, is that water rates have gone up tremendously. And I don't know, Arcata did okay, but Eureka had a real kind of disaster when they tried to impose a rate increase last year and the year before, and people are very concerned about it.
So the status is that those rate increases have been adopted by various jurisdictions.
The ones that we have so far, that doesn't include any of our capital improvement going forward.
But Eureka was a real difficult goal.
But there
3
was-
times the council, citizens group coming out, and with 218, it's harder. And I'm a little concerned in the smaller communities, you could mount a 218 challenge if you want to mobilize Blue Lakes and Manila.
They get squeezed. But we're not, a lot of Eureka's problems had to do with their own infrastructure issues.
Right.
It's not just us. It's not just
We
us.
were about 25% of their rate increase, 75% of it was their own cost.
So have the jurisdictions observed an impact on consumption of the rate increase?
I don't think we're far enough in for that to say, because the shift that we're really talking about is when Evergreen closed, and we had furloughs here for a year, and we did a lot to try and ease that burden, but it was kind of just like that. So, this year would tell that. But our rate increases in Eureka were delayed, and so they just got started a couple months ago.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem with Eureka was they just jumped it. I mean, they didn't do a gradual increase, it just all at one time, and everybody woke up.
Well, and that's the problem. Everybody's in the same situation we are in terms of the infrastructure, for the most part. I mean, McKinleyville is cheaper because
But the acceptability of step-by-step gradual increases is much greater than all at once.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Right, and we had sort of an emergency with mill closing. But, if you look at that, I mean, our median household income here in Humboldt County is obviously much lower than Sonoma County, but our water bills are really not that much lower. And that's, people look at that, and first of all, understanding why is hard, because it doesn't really make sense. We have so much water, what's the problem? But I think our community understands much better now, how we work and what the mills did and all of that, but that doesn't really help us to pay for it.
Water resource planning effort that we started a year and a half ago has been a great public education out.
Yeah, well, I've been reading about it, I've been following it.
Well, and John, I want to say, this will look familiar because you came to so many of the meetings. Thank you for doing that.
Well, I'm just, as a non-participant in those meetings, just from reading the newspapers, I've been able to learn a lot and follow that process, so.
The average person knows an awful lot more about what we do now, or that we even exist. So.
Well, and they appreciate these issues,
Yes.
I
About
think.
10 minutes if they need to be,
Yeah.
about 10 minutes if they need to be on the road.
The discussion is
Be
all
fine,
very
be fine,
good.
okay. Just want to be mindful of your schedule.
So,
Let's push it out to 20, I think we'll be okay.
okay, thanks. Well, we'll pick it up though too, because we want to talk about Quagga briefly. So, so we did engage in this public outreach process to engage the public, and that did go really well. We formed an advisory committee, which Sherry was actually part of, and before she was on our board, since doing our work, to help the water district put together the public process and the outreach, and also then to formulate recommendations to our board. So that was the composition of who served on our committee, and we went to great lengths to have a balance, and our board did a lot of work internally to come to consensus on this whole process before we went out to do it. So initially we did a lot of education, then and all of these spaces had public meetings and public input. So we did a lot of education, then we generated options that would both address our water rights and our water rates, and then got feedback on those options. And then, well, before I go to that, so yeah, we had over 50 education sessions with community groups and the public. There were 9 public sessions, and we came to an agreement for a framework for evaluating water resource planning options for the future in general, and a suite of possible options, and a really good report was prepared by the advisory committee. And if you'd like that, I know you have a lot of things to read, and it sounds like you have been keeping up, but it is a really thoughtful and well-prepared report that the advisory committee gave to us. So in the evaluation criteria, there were 2 things that really rose to the top as threshold, and this is all coming from the public. Local control, that any project that we pursue, the public wanted to see the district maintain control of the water rights, and that it be legally viable. So we bumped those up to be threshold criteria, and then the other criteria you can see there, and you have the materials, so I won't go through all of them, but obviously you can see the range of interest, and this is again, this all came from the public meetings. So the 3 general options to put water to beneficial use were that we could use it within the district boundaries, we could use it outside the district boundaries, which would involve a transfer of water, or use it for in-stream flows. And outside the district boundaries could be, Trinidad, or it could be LA, just anywhere outside the district boundaries.
And part of that just triggers different processes the district would have to go through with the State Water Resource Control Board.
So you can see the advisory committee recommendations, which again really came out of all the public meetings, because that was their job, was to compile that public work within the district boundaries. And I won't go read them all, but you can see there's a range of ideas that came up. Outside of the district, you can see the range here as well. And it is worth noting that, part of what we were looking for is to get a sense of where the public stood on use outside of the district boundaries, because, everyone, if anything that is known about the water district, water bags is what pops into people's heads.
Well, are there municipalities in Humboldt County who have water supply problems and,
Yes.
and are in the district?
Southern Humboldt and Trinidad as well. The issue there, though, is the infrastructure.
I should say municipalities or districts.
Yeah, Southern Humboldt is having huge water issues. And Trinidad actually did a study looking at, what one of the options was, to connect with our system. But the cost, it was cost prohibitive for them at the time.
Well, politically, they were not.
Yeah, well, then, yes, the other
They
thing
saw
is that you
reducing,
bring water
it's
to a
not like-
community, and then a community has the potential to grow, where it doesn't right now, so,
Costs a lot
that is
to
the
live,
issue
but-
too. Yeah.
They could connect McKinley.
Yeah, but it was really expensive, just
Okay.
to do that amount of pipe.
Okay.
I mean, maybe we could do short sea shipping to Trinidad from the,
Yeah, short haul shipping.
water bag up. But, yeah, it's not inexpensive. So, so you can see though the ideas that folks had, and then there was the in-stream flow idea, releasing water from Ruth during the summer or fall when there isn't a diversion to provide environmental benefit to aquatic species in their habitat. But as Bruce said, then that's upon somebody to prove that that would be a benefit, an environmental benefit.
I don't think anybody, Tom, I don't know of anybody that's actually done that, so we'd be plowing new ground.
There are some sevens, but I
Yeah,
believe they're all
right.
foregoing a diversion.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no economic
Yeah.
So
benefit.
I think the difference here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is in most other scenarios, you have reduced flows and you're returning some of that historic flow.
Correct.
Where here you would actually be increasing it above the historic flows.
Correct.
And I'm not aware of somebody saying that that's a benefit other than Trinity River. The summer flows in Trinity River, for temperature reasons and they're way higher than they were historically.
Well, we have historic and we have recent historic. For the last 55 years, the last 55 years, we've increased the.
Having been in that Trinity River before the dam,
Right, and it's worth saying that all of these options, as Barbara said, have different levels of revenue that they would generate, and also vastly vary on the amount of water use that they would have.
One thing we didn't mention with the out-of-district use is that, as you know, there's a lot of desal plants that are in the planning, and this could be a tremendous savings from energy, carbon. They may be our most likely customer out of the area. It would be an alternative to desal, but it's still the cost of going out there.
Yeah, and there are, the cost is what, $1,500 an acre foot for water out of the desal plant, and you've got then you've got the waste.
They haven't really
And they
figured that out yet
No,
sufficiently.
I don't think they have.
And then they have all the energy
hazardous
it
waste.
takes, the carbon footprint, so.
Anyway.
So where we are now is that we accepted the advisory committee's report last summer. We've established 3 water use goals for the district. We've tiered the options that we were given, and we've developed a draft implementation plan that we just approved in draft form at our last meeting last week. So our goals are to protect the water district's water rights and increase use for that reason, fiscal sustainability, generate revenues to do some ratepayer relief if possible, and also to pay for the infrastructure going forward, and then environmental sustainability. Our top tier options that the board, after the board received the report, were local water sales and use within the district boundaries, developing or transferring water to another public agency. If you caught it, there was the option of a public agency versus a private agency or in private organization. What our board has said is that we really want to just pursue public agencies, at least initially, and we're not really interested in anybody private at the moment.
Could you discuss on the outside of the district what that boundary means, how far outside?
Right now, we mean our actual district boundaries, but.
We don't consider anything else.
You're on 2, yeah.
I think the boards, I don't know if we explicitly discussed it, but I think in our mind's eye, we're thinking California.
Yeah, and
We're not
actually.
thinking about shipping it to Nevada, for example. I don't know if anybody
So
would
just within California.
Right.
That's the marine transport.
Marine transport concept.
We never really contemplated
We
going
actually
north.
never talked about going north or.
They got a lot of water north.
I know. Yeah.
The other thing that I think that it is fair to say, it's not in writing in the plan, but the way that we have talked about it internally, and also the sense that we got from the public is that the closer to home, the better, in terms of political reasons, environmental reasons, all of that.
That's not built into the option of the.
It's not explicit, but that is
That's
preference, I think.
That's the intent of the board. I mean, I'd love to ship water to Redway. I've talked to the guys down there. If you need water, we'd be happy to figure out a way to get you water. Let's talk about it, but we, so far, they're drafting out of the U River. That's, I guess they've figured out how to do it in a way that works for them, so.
But
I don't know,
But
yeah,
I think
is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, it's just, we haven't wanted to close the door to options, but I think that it would be much harder to move forward with, San Diego than it would be with Marin. And I think that's kind of maybe what you guys were getting.
On the first point, is there any kind of consortium or group of overlapping interests, the Harbor District, the Water District, the business community, looking at marketing those industrial sites?
I can tell you.
We met with the Harbor District and a number of economic development professionals, and they were part of our process on the advisory.
But I mean, is there an effort that's underway to try to locate potential developers or users of the sites on the mill sites?
There's not an explicit project, and I mean, part of it is that the county's, it seems like the county's position on that is that idea of, attracting businesses doesn't generally pan out, and so,
well,
folks are,
that's true, but
spend a lot of resources on it.
That's true, but on the other hand, and maybe, I just don't understand these things, but I don't know where else in California such a thing exists. Maybe Mare Island or something. Can't think of really another example.
This is the general, whether it's correct or not, but the general consensus is, even among the economic development folks, is that the impediments to economic development in the North Coast are such that water is not a significant factor. In other words, it's there, it's nice.
It doesn't offset the problems.
But it doesn't offset the other problems. And we have, we've gone out and said, we're there, we want to work with you,
I didn't necessarily mean it was the water district's responsibility
No,
individually, but it just seems like there's overlapping interests in.
Well, it might make sense.
Oh, we've talked, go ahead.
It was a few years ago that the county, the city of Eureka, and the Harbor District partnered on the Harbor Revitalization Plan. And my understanding was that was some of the motivation to look at land use availability, how it was zoned, what are economic needs. And I'm not sure what happened, but it might be worth at least trying to convene some of those key parties with the economic development professionals.
Part of it is, even if everything I said turned out to be true, part of it is the moment, we hope it's a moment, but the period we're in of economic, where nobody is investing in anything, people are just sitting on money.
But we couldn't even hold on to what we had.
Right. Good point. Good point.
Yes, and the last thing, not to short shift it, is dedicating some portion of the available water for in-stream flow. So we have met with the agencies several times and are looking at doing a scoping workshop in the next few months. And then we also have actually applied for a grant that would be money to do an analysis of what studies would even need to be done to begin to look at this, because
Which was that grant for? Somebody asked me, I didn't know.
Around between 70 and 100,000.
Yeah. So we have moved forward to some degree on, checking the viability or I guess the best way to say it is maybe, seeing if there are resources that could help us on all of these things. But right now the plan is in draft form, and so what we'd like to do is get, another round of feedback on it, and we're looking to approve it this summer. So that's what's in the plan, and we're looking for input. And so, John, if you have anything that you'd like to share with us from Chesbro's office, or if you want to weigh in, and then we'll do a public hearing in July, maybe a couple of them, and then we're looking to adopt it in August.
So we've actually, we've talked to resource agencies, the economic development folks,
Met with the Harbor District.
We met with the Harbor District and talked with them at length about, just making sure that feasibility, it's kind of a feasibility, at a very cursory level to begin with, and even more specifically at the staff level. The staffs have been talking between the Harbor District and the Water District very carefully about feasibility and workability.
And we're going to talk to the board supervisors.
And we're going to meet with, or talk with them, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
We've talked with them all the way along in this process.
And if you did just want to see this, I know we're quick, but just to give you a sense, because it is pretty eye-opening. So we've looked at water-intensive businesses and industries. So here's a local couple local water users. Remember, we have 60 million gallons of water per day that we're talking about.
Your y-axis is
not
change.
even one here for beverages of a local business. Then if you compare like a Coca-Cola or a big bottling facility, they're start to move towards 2. And then there's those beverage, here's some manufacturing, here's food processing, those are our municipal customers, power production, those are our municipal customers, the tiny little goes for power production, and then here's the mills. So just to, so here's all of our, if we had one of those, every single one of those plants, it gets us up to about, almost 11, which is about what our municipal customers are using right now, all put together. And then again, here, one mill and then the other mill.
Okay, but granted that, in terms of the problem of paying for infrastructure, there's no question that even at those lower level users.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that was why we were, very cooperative with trying to work with the mill, within bounds and reasons that didn't, adversely impact our other customers. And that's why number 1 is on the list, because even though we're not very optimistic, you could probably hear in what we're saying, there was no way we were going to take it off the list.
And everything else.
And there's other good impacts to the community too.
But what we're looking at is we're trying to sell the water that comes from our surface delivery system that used to go to the mill, which is raw water, it's not treated water. We're hitting up against the capacity of our municipal rain collector system. It's the surface untreated water that we need to find a customer for.
So those are two different
water systems.
Different systems.
Yeah.
They're
only the same.
One is a surface.
Yeah, it's all
one is surface diversion, the other is the rainy wells with the French drains. That's the municipal stuff. That's the cleaner.
So even like
less
a brewery
turbidity,
would
basically.
need to somehow get treated.
So in order to attract any of those uses, like let's say a brewery or drinking water supply or something, you'd have to expand the treatment system to make. I mean, we could simply take the water that's available.
Right, it's just right off of the.
But we don't want to abandon that surface system. We have such a huge investment in that infrastructure that if we don't have a paying customer to use it, at some point, it's just not going to be maintained.
And there is some system that the mill had that did some amount of filtration. I don't think, we don't know everything about it, but it's possible that there's something that's part of that.
But that would be a further obstacle to attracting those water users, would be the cost of treatment.
On your water bottle.
So we're out of time, but, was there anything real quick that you wanted to say about WADA?
Well, might give this to Tom and John, but
Didn't we send a letter on that?
we sent a couple letters with,
Did you get the copies of those?
well, they're a little dated, but with some ideas more on the policy level. And I think our key points were that with some of these emerging aquatic issues is, those of us who don't have the problem need to do our part. And we actually were very proactive and took some steps prior to there being legislation requiring it, but we just think there needs to be appropriate attention to those that have the problem. And I think I've seen some progress, and actually the Q&A sheet on DFG's website actually now is talking about some things that we had previously suggested. It sounds like there is consideration for new CF stickers on boats that have a scan. Another suggestion that someone came up with is get the county on there, because if nothing else, it's a quick reference. If you see some of the boats coming from a county that has a problem and you don't yet have this more sophisticated computer system scan, we have an inspection program, you can at least begin to query, hey, your county of origin is Riverside. So at the end of the day, I think our points were there needs to be efforts at the source, not just those of us that don't have the problem. If there can be some sort of economical voting, tracking, and registration system that would help, realize that's a longer term solution. We thought I don't know how things like voting registration fees, if that's legislative action, but even sometimes 50 cents or $1 can go a long way to fund things that target awareness or target those prevention measures, and we in Aqua and others have advanced those. So there's a couple of policy suggestions at the back, and it looks like some of them are beginning to be advanced, which is good news.
I'm much more familiar with the impact and potential impact on Clear Lake. I haven't heard much relative to the water system here in Humboldt County. So there is a presence in the lake?
No, our concern is that we have a prevention plan and that we have a pretty rigorous monitoring, but a lot of the lakes in our area do not. And so right now, as far as we know, there isn't, but if there were to be, we would have.
One of the things
We're worried that
really
Clear Lake ends up with it. There's bass fishermen that go on tournament circuits that go to Clear Lake and they end up
Well, they've engaged really, in the last few years, in a really active program there. But still, I think there's a lot of concern.
One of the things that really caught our attention, Wes, and I think prompted our board to be proactive, is that the fact that in their little villager state where they're not yet developed and they're just free floating, that it can take 2 to 3 years, even up to 5 years, for them to manifest themselves where you start to see them. So our point is, the chance of there being boats in infested waters and coming all the way to Ruth Lake was pretty remote, and then probably the bass tournaments were the greatest exposure, but they could be marching up the I-5 corridor. We don't even know that corridor well. So that's where we said we should be proactive. And so we worked with the CSD, and Trinity County was a very helpful partner. And we have we blocked a lot of access. We have a huge education component, multimedia. Letters. We sent letters to every leaseholder, every property owner around Ruth Lake 2 seasons in a row, every fishing, boating, tackle shop in 5 counties just to raise awareness. And we now have a full-blown registration inspection program. And the first year there was a lot of grousing, but it's really settled down, and I think there's buying for it.
Our view over all of that was that probably of all everything we have, possess, or deal with in this agency, the most precious thing we deal with is the water quality in that lake and preserving that. I think we spent close to $100 grand to try and make sure that and at the end of the day, it may be for naught, because one of these days we may find out we got them in the lake. But to not do it was not an option for us.
And we can't shut the lake down.
So if we could get people who would have it, if we could control, start working on that end of things, which is it would be at a statewide level, it would be very, we think, beneficial.
And the other one, just to plant the seed, is if there's not already discussions at the appropriate age on New Zealand lead snail, that's a bit more, closer in our backyard, different set of issues, nobody can be trucker control, but the folks working on that finally got to the Board of Supervisors, and one of my questions was, have you been briefed, Tom, and the senior resource managers in the community? I think there at least needs to be awareness.
I haven't, but Caltrans had a program on that, and I've been watching what's going on, and I have that on my list of things to ask about, is not only the lead snails, but pipe minnow. From a biological perspective, if they ever got from the eel to the bad, you might have as big of a problem with salmon and steelhead as anything else that you're going to be facing in the watershed.
And it could affect how we manage the water.
Yep, absolutely.
Definitely.
It might be worth convening. I mean, DFG, I've got to say, especially in tough resource times, that they've really, there's been a presence, they're willing to travel. They hosted a big workshop up in Oregon that Barbara and I went to last year, and they just with the Board of Supervisors. Definitely, they're trying, and I think a little closer to home, it would be worth getting the right folks and agencies to have a conversation.
But the New Zealand one still really scares me. It's marching down.
I hate to say it, it's here, and it's going to be here, and it's not going to go away, and you can get 99.99999% of the people educated, and you're going to get it anyway. That's pretty much what we've seen everywhere else.
Well, this has been really useful to me, long overdue, and so let's plan to do an update, I don't know.
Before the weekend?
Yeah, before I'm shown the door and I get to finally come home.
And I know you have to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the
I just want to check, make sure, is there any public
No, just the water issues they're talking about are of interest to Trinity. So we're trying to be, really create a lot more communication between the district and Cooley County, and we've been coming over here, and I think we're scheduled a meeting.
Go over to the county
Well, that-
supervisors.
That helps me when you all are communicating, and trying to get on the same page. The more that happens, the better job I can do representing the district.
Yeah, so we're obviously very concerned that.
Any public comment?
I think they're on a good track.
I guess so. Okay, so thank you so much. Safe travels.
One would be if you have that welcome muscle thing electronically, I'd love to get that. We had somebody asking about some legislative changes possibly for Lake County. And it seems like coordinating them if we were gonna do something next year would be
Would
great.
you like our plan, or just those letters on?
If you have a plan, anything you have on that, especially suggestions of potential legislative changes.
We'll get you the letters, we'll get you the plan.
Hi, this is Larry Jackson, Blue Ox Radio. We're down here, we're just cranking it out 24 hours a day for your enjoyment. And we sure hope you like what we're playing. We welcome your suggestions. If you want to get involved, that's good too. We can always use more volunteers. I'd like to thank the folks at Prometheus Radio for giving us a hand getting this station started. I mean, this is radio the way it used to be. Probably the way it should be. Non-commercial, community-driven. And we're just here having fun, and that's what it's all about. So thanks, guys. You did a great job.
And that's my show for tonight. But before I go, I'd like to give a shout out to the people at Prometheus. Without their help, we probably wouldn't be on the air right now. Thank you, Prometheus. And we've had nothing but support since we started this effort. And it's through community support that we exist, and it's through community support that we're going to continue to exist. So thank you, community. And we have room for more people to get involved. So come on down and check us out at the Blue Ox Radio.